The first thing I wanted to talk about is a general practicing warm-up. Any kind of tips you can give people.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'd love to know is before you go on stage,
Yeah.
I know you like to run songs and kind of practice.
Yeah.
What is your usual kind of warm-up?
Well, first of all, let me say, you don't want to be hyped up before you go on stage. People always say, how do you psych yourself up for a show? You don't. You psych yourself down, if anything. Because, you know, people like you and me, we need to play well the second we're on stage. When we start, we need to be in a great place. So you need to be calm, right? So as far as practice goes, there are a few different ways that you can practice. The one I call sincere practice is the best one, and that is play the song as if the audience is in front of you. If you mess up, just keep going, but practice as if this is it, the crowd are listening, you know?
Well, my concept for practicing and the methods have changed drastically through the years, and even my perspective on practicing has changed. It's really based on the personal desires of the artist. You know, for me to sit here and say, you have to practice, you know, that's almost like a command or something. Whereas people who are aspiring to reach a particular technical proficiency, you don't have to tell them to practice. It's just an inborn desire, you know? And when I was young, I had a very regimented, rigid practice schedule, because that's what I knew. That's, you know, that's the way my brain worked, you know? I listened to records that I loved, and I tried to pick up riffs, and I played in bands, and that was vital. You have to find that balance, but I spent a lot of time in my bedroom playing exercises, scales, chords, learning all the fundamentals, because not that it's necessary, but for me, it was a desire.
And you know, when you meet aspiring guitar players, what is like your most popular piece of practicing advice?
Well, you know, it's kind of like, well, two things really. I mean, I think I think there's a tendency to, when we're playing, we can be living and entertaining in our head how great it sounds, you know, and then sometimes if we really listen to what we're doing, especially if we record it and listen back, oh wow, it's not quite as spot on as I'm hearing it in my head. I'm kind of romanticizing in my head. So I think there has to be an element of just being honest with yourself, you know, and not living in that bubble of like just to romance yourself that you've really hit the mark. Sometimes you have to be a little more discerning and go, you know, I'm going to, even if it's just on the iPhone, you record yourself, and I do that sometimes at home when I'm working on songs, and it's always kind of like, it's a little uncomfortable, but it's necessary, you know. So I do that to try to get a check on a reality check, really. But then the balance of that is just kind of chase your muse, enjoy what you find, and, you know, I don't think everybody has their beautiful thing to add, you know, and you know, I've heard all these awesome things like you do that nobody else would do like you do, you know, or this guy or me or whatever, you know what I mean? So you have to kind of chase your muse and really develop that thing that provides joy and that excitement to want to practice.
So like when I was younger, I had a really disciplined practice regime, and I have like a practice journal, and I'd do all these different things. Were you ever like that, or do you just kind of go from one thing to the other and just play a lot of music? And
well, when I studied like I studied classical piano and clarinet and saxophone and bassoon, and on those you would have sort of a regiment like that, like, you know, you have to practice your scales and your arpeggios, and then you practice long tones, and then you practice maybe an etude, and then you practice your concert piece or something like that.
So that was like a foundation for you.
Yeah.
Like a musical.
Yeah, and I really didn't like practicing the scales and arpeggios at all. And you know, at the time I was like, why do I want these things, you know? But learning to improvise and stuff, wow, it's all arpeggios and scales. You know, everything that you want to play is either a part or, you know, created from a scale or an arpeggio.
Well, I believe you should have a routine. It isn't just pick up the guitar and play a G chord. It's the most important thing, I believe, is to. It's like calisthenics. It's like an athlete, because we are athletes.
Yeah.
And so I have certain scales that I practice, and then I have intervals that I practice. I do things for the right hand, and I do things for the left hand. There's something that I've been teaching to other guitarists, which I watch people play, and the beginners and the mid players, when you say play a C chord, they will go right, and as you know, there's no time for that. So I teach people to play the chord, and then release it slightly, and then hit it, so that you can play.
That's a good idea.
And so what happens is the muscles.
They get used to it.
Yeah, the muscles go right to the chord. So when you're playing with a dance band, when I auditioned for Ray Charles, it was a fast blues in F, and it went like this. I mean, I was reading the music, right? But it has to move along, so it was like. So each chord has to be there,
Right.
And you have to tell your right hand, do not stop.
Yeah.